Now, in one of his essays, a major proponent of human rights in a Muslim context identifies polygyny as a violation of human rights, inasmuch as it discriminates against women. Discrimination here is instantiated by the unequal treatment of women, explained by what is referred to as reciprocity, that is, the principle that X should treat Y in the same way that X would like to be treated by Y. On this filiation, Sharia stands in need of reinterpretation in order to ban polygyny and thus bring it into conformity with the principle of equality. Yet it would seem to me that were equality clearly a primary right in the Western scheme, really the aim of this critique, allowing polyandry would be just as effective an option as would banning polygyny. But this is never contemplated, despite the fact that allowing polyandry would carry the additional advantage of promoting greater freedom, itself also a primary right. Rather, the ban on polygyny appears to take precedence as the true aim of pressing the principle of equality. And even the more perfect equality, not to mention freedom, that would obtain by allowing polyandry is sacrificed to the desire to ban polygyny. Of course, whether you believe this or not, the issue here is not polygyny or polyandry, but the tendency in human rights discourses to conceal while pursuing interests and outcomes that lie beyond its stated objectives. Perhaps few have been more eloquent, certainly among those writing in the West, in insisting that human rights discourses conceal a hidden agenda than the human rights attorney and activist Makau Mutua. In his book, Human Rights, A Political and Cultural Critique, he refers explicitly to the holy trinity of liberalism, democracy, and human rights. He insists that the human rights corpus is essentially a philosophy promoting the diffusion and primacy of liberalism around the globe. Liberalism, moreover, is not an abstract, neutral, or unstoried enterprise. It is emphatically European, and by extension we might add, American. According to Mutua, the evangelical zeal with which it is promoted alongside the depths of the deniers of its role as one of the broader aims of the human rights discourse, and I quote here, leaves humanity stuck at the door of liberalism, unable to go forward or imagine a post-liberal society. To be sure, liberalism is an amorphous term, both denoting and connoting many things to many people. I do not think it would be a misrepresentation of things, however, to say, as does human rights advocate Sally Mary, that, and I quote, human rights are part of a distinctive modernist vision of the good and just society that emphasizes autonomy, choice, equality, secularism, and protection of the body. Again, their pretensions to transcendence and universalism notwithstanding, these values are quite storied and often pressed to teleological ends. This may not always be the case, but it is routinely so, especially when it comes to Muslim majority polities. In her book, Toleration as Recognition, Anna Galeotti identifies two liberal approaches, the neutralist and the perfectionist. Neutralists see the liberal order as a hospitable empty box in which any culture, tradition, way of life, or worldview is welcome to pursue its dream. Pluralism, according to this vision, both in the sense of allowing competing visions and suspending judgment on their relative rightness, is a primary value. As such, proponents of a liberal order, including the state, have no right to engage in any attempt to produce better citizens. Perfectionists, on the other hand, see liberalism as entailing a distinct and concrete moral outlook, which must be actively defended and boldly promoted. Pluralism, on this understanding, is a secondary, if not tertiary, value, and those whose way of life clashes with the fundamental values of freedom, autonomy, and self-development may be either tolerated if it proves useless or counterproductive to repress them, or coerced if it seems feasible to force them to comply, or if they appear to pose an imminent threat to the liberal order. Hijab, for example, that is the headscarf, according to perfectionists, while causing no harm in itself, must be combated because it implies women's subordination and invisibility, which makes it incompatible with liberal ideals. Clitoridectomy, on the other hand, must not be tolerated because it is harmful. In sum, perfectionist liberals take a direct interest in producing better citizens, in which capacity they may deem it necessary to force people to become autonomous, secular, individualistic beings in accordance with concrete visions of the liberal good. Perfectionist liberalism is the form in which human rights, at least to my mind, seems to have come or have been pitched to most Muslim communities. It does not take much to see, of course, that autonomy, equality, protection of the body, freedom, and the like are all concretized in accordance with views, histories, and sensibilities entirely exterior to these values themselves. Otherwise, there is no reason why hijab, for example, would not be consistent with every one of the aforementioned values, including autonomy, choice, secularism, and protection of the body, as well as freedom, development, and equality. Clitoridectomy, on the other hand, given our, including my own cultural biases and sensibilities, is a practice much like euthanasia that I, along with many of us in this room, would strongly object to and very strongly encourage others to object to. Whether or not, however, especially when compared to how we treat, say, prostitution or euthanasia, it is consistent with autonomy, equality, secularism, protecting the body, and the like, seems to me to be an entirely different matter. And it seems to me the only way to argue that it is inconsistent with these values would be through the language of human rights, not through the substance of its values.